Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Yes, okay, good. Welcome, welcome to all of you joining us by Zoom. There is nobody here this morning at the temple. Everybody is joining in from Zoom. Last week, we must have had over 50 people here for our Shotsuki monthly memorial service, but I guess with the daylight savings and everything, people found it a little more difficult to get up this morning maybe, but it's nice to see all of you on Zoom, so welcome. And we'll begin this morning's service with a moment of silent meditation, followed by the recitation of the name of the Buddha, or the Onenbutsu. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amitabs, Namo Andabs, Namo Andabs, Namo Andabs, Namo Andabs, Namo Andabs, Namo Andabs. Thank you. And next we will have a reading, and we're going to be reading our pledge, and I'm just bringing it up on the screen. Can you all see that okay? Yeah, you should be able to, I think. Okay, so we'll read together our pledge. Our pledge. Breaking out of my shell, I shall carefully share a warm smile and speak gentle words, just like the kind Buddha. Not becoming lost in my greed, anger, and ignorance, I shall be open-minded and act accordingly, just like the calm and peaceful Buddha. Not putting myself first, I shall share in the joy and sadness of others, just like the compassionate Buddha. Realizing the gift of life we have received, I shall live each day to its fullest, like the Buddha who continues to emancipate all. Namo Amitabha. Namo Amitabha. Next, we will have the Suture Chanting. We're going to be chanting the Junirai, both the Japanese version and then reading the English translation afterwards. And I think you can see it on your screen now. Okay, so we'll chant the Junirai together. Namandabs, 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 namandabs. Keshu teni shokugyo amida sen ryozoku son zai hi mi me anago muryo bushi shui ne konjiki shinjo nyosen no shamata gyo nyozobu ryomoku jo nyaku shorenge koga 将来弥陀尊面前上如満月以後有如千日月少如天空くしらこが将来弥陀尊観音頂戴観地宇宙主寿名相諸言のぶくげどまけ馬こが将来弥陀尊無微無空故障上修徳下受月女国小さり悪徳自在こが将来弥陀尊実法妙門菩薩衆無量小魔女三男一生修上願力寺こが将来弥陀尊根体保険自証下前言上上名大座おひざ上如線のこが将来弥陀尊実も将来勝負し権限人図し安楽戦後尊厳上空行こが将来弥陀尊小無常無我と薬女水月伝よろ一種世も無名字こが将来弥陀尊非尊不説無悪名薬無如に悪の不主に死心拒否尊こが将来弥陀尊非尊無量勉強無所主悪知識往生不退死亡大こが将来弥陀尊がせずい尊具独自修善無変如海水小逆前後小上者 shi ojo anago. Namanavs, 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 namanavs. Next, we'll read the English translation, which you'll see on your screens. The 12 Adorations, Junirai translation. Before Amida Buddha, whom heavenly beings worship, I humble myself in deepest reverence. In his wondrous land of bliss, surrounded is he by countless bodhisattvas. His golden form shines forth, pure like the king of Mount Sumeru. His practice of truth is steadfast like an elephant's pace. His eyes radiate like pure blue lotus blossoms. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. His countenance is perfectly pure and round like the full moon. His majestic light shines like 1,000 suns and moons. His voice is like a heavenly drum, yet like a heavenly bird, kokila. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. Avalokiteshvara wears upon his crown the image of Amida adorned with many precious jewels. He subdues the arrogance of demons and heretics. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. Incomparable, vast and pure, his virtues are. Clearly extending like vast open space, his act freely benefiting all. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. Bodhisattvas from the 10 quarters and countless maras, demons, always venerate him. He dwells with vow power for the sake of all beings. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. In the golden treasure pond where the lotus flowers bloom, established with goodness, is a wondrous throne, where reigns the Buddha like the king of the mounts. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. From the 10 quarters, bodhisattvas come, revealing wondrous powers, they attain blissful state. Honoring his face, they offer eternal homage. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. All things are transient and without self, like the moon on water, lightning, shadow, or the dew. The Dharma cannot be expressed by words, the Buddha proclaimed. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. No words of evil are in his land, no fear of evildoers, nor evil paths. With sincere heart, all beings worship him. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. His land of infinite expediencies is without degenerate things or wicked beings. Upon rebirth, non-retrogressive bodhi does one attain. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. Thus have I praised the virtues of Amida Buddha. Boundless are they like the water of the sea. Upon receiving these pure and good qualities, may all beings be reborn into his land. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Okay. Okay. So once again, good morning, and I'm going to begin by reading a passage from Shinran Shoni's works. This is actually coming from a passage known as a lamp for the latter ages. And they were a series of letters that Shinran Shoni had written regarding the teachings. And so I'd like to read a passage from this, and then I'll give my Dharma talk following. The idea of Amida's coming at the moment of death is for those who seek to gain birth in the Pure Land by doing various practices, for they are practitioners of self-power. The moment of death is of central concern to such people, for they have not yet attained true Shinjin. We may also speak of Amida's coming at the moment of death in the case of those who, though they have committed the 10 transgressions and the 5 grave offenses throughout their lives, encounter a teacher in the hour of death, and are led at the very end to utter the Nembutsu. The practicer of true Shinjin, however, abides in the stage of the truly settled, for he or she has already been grasped, never to be abandoned. There is no need to wait in anticipation for the moment of death, no need to rely on Amida's coming. At the time Shinjin becomes settled, birth too becomes settled. There is no need for the deathbed rites that prepare one for Amida's coming. Right-mindedness, then, is the settling of the Shinjin of the universal primal vow. Because of the realization of the Shinjin, a person necessarily attains the supreme nirvana. Shinjin is the mind that is single. The mind that is single is the diamond-like mind. The diamond-like mind is the mind aspiring for great enlightenment. And this is other power that is true, other power. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. A little bit lengthy passage there, but it's talking about essentially time. And today, being daylight, beginning of daylight saving, it's always a topic about time. I hope all of you didn't have too much of a difficulty getting up this morning. I know last night I turned all our clocks in our house ahead 1 hour, and this morning I came to the temple and I turned all the clocks in the temple ahead 1 hour. And I thought it was kind of a silly thing for us to have to do twice a year, moving the clock forward and then moving the clock back. You know, as I was doing this, it struck me that I think you've probably heard a lot of people, or I've heard the advice that it's a good time to change the batteries in your clock when you move it ahead or move it back for daylight savings. But I began to realize how wasteful that truly is, because if you wait till the clock actually starts slowing down or stopping, it's probably a better time to replace the battery than doing it when there's probably still life left in the battery. Anyways, that's here nor there. But it's all about time, you know. And it reminded me, actually, of an episode I had. Oh, this is many, many years ago while I was still in Toronto. One of the things I was involved in when I was in Toronto, and it goes to show you that I was much younger back then, I think. I had more energy, because one of the things that I started when I was in Toronto, I had the good opportunity to encounter a taiko master, a taiko teacher. And I got him to come to our temple, and we started a taiko group in Toronto. And I believe they're still continuing to this day. But I practiced with them for about 2 years, I guess. And then they just became too good for me. So and I was busy with temple activities as well. So I slowed down. But during those 2 years, there was a young fellow who was he was quite dedicated member of our temple. He was still a teenager, and he was what they call Oba-chanko, which means grandmother's son. Okay, so he really, really respected both his grandparents, his grandfather and grandmother, and both his grandparents were very devout members of the temple. And so whenever the grandparents would come, and often he would come along as well. But I struck quite a friendship with this young person, and he became one of our taiko members. And often at the end of the practice, I would drive him home. On my way home, I would take him home, and we would have some really engaging conversations on the way back to his house. And so one day, this is when he was about second year university, he ended up taking philosophy. And as one of his subjects that he took up Buddhism as a subject, which I was very happy and proud that he had such interest in it. But he made a comment one day that was very interesting, because he said, you know, Sensei, he said, my professor, recently we've been studying Japanese Buddhism. And in that Japanese Buddhism, he talked about Pure Land Buddhism, or the type of Buddhism that we follow. And he was telling, the professor said, this is sort of a pseudo-Buddhism, a new form of Buddhism, in which the emphasis is on the afterlife, as opposed to on practice here and now. And it really bothered me that this professor phrased it that way. And again, this is about time. Okay, when is the emphasis of Pure Land Buddhism? Is it for the afterlife, going to the Pure Land, or is it here and now? Now, if you know basic Buddhism, it's all about practice for your daily living, to awaken to the true reality of enlightenment here and now. So the emphasis is very much on how we lead our everyday life, mindfulness, etc. But it can be misconstrued sometimes that Pure Land Buddhists emphasize the next life, if you will. And to this, Shinran Shonin was very aware, and he was very concerned about this as well. And he wanted to make sure, he wanted to point out the fact that in fact, in Pure Land Buddhism, it is this moment that is most important. And the passage that I just read from his letters emphasizes this. He tells them that, you know, the moment of death is important for those who have still yet awakened to the great working of Amida Buddha. And for those who may not have had encountered a teacher or somebody to guide them in their life, and only encounters this teacher at the very end, for such a person, perhaps, the moment of death becomes important. But he says, for a practicer of true Shinji, however, it's that moment of awakening to the Buddha's compassion. That is the most important. And that happens here and now. And in fact, Shinran Shonin calls this the one thought moment of joy. In Buddhist timology, I don't know what you call it, the measurement of time in Buddhism, the shortest span of time is what they call one thought moment. Okay, one thought moment. So it's that moment when you have an idea or a thought or an aspiration or an inspiration. Okay, there's certain moments in our lives, and Reverend Ogui, who we've had several times, I guess, as a guest sensei here in Steveston. He used to be the former bishop of the Buddhist Church of America at one time. But Reverend Ogui used to always say, it's that aha moment of life. You know, that moment when you wake up or you have that clarity in your life. And that moment is the importance for us. And through listening to the teachings, we receive these moments of clarity. We receive these moments of wonderful awakening. And so Shinran Shonin emphasizes that for us, this is the moment that is most important, is to awaken to the compassion that's always working upon us. And when we listen to the Dharma, we encounter it in many different ways. Yesterday, we had our Dharma school session here. And I've told this actually at memorial service yesterday afternoon. So for the Akunes, they've already heard me talk about this. But During the Dharma School session, because of what's going on in Europe with Russia and the Ukraine, we emphasize on conflict resolution. You know, it's a very deep topic for young kids. These are kids that are under 10 to understand conflict resolution. But I introduced a Dharma story to them that made it a little easier to understand. I know, I think many of you have heard me tell this story, but it was a story, the Dharma story, of a couple. And they actually were textile sellers. They sold cloth and whatnot, fabric sellers. And this couple, they received a gift one day of a number of manju, or Japanese pastries, right? And both the husband and wife, they were great fans of manju. They loved manju. And so they started eating the manju that they received as a gift. And it came down to the very last one. And when it came down to the last one, both of them wanted to have it. So the husband sort of dares the wife to a competition on how they're going to resolve who's going to get the last manju. And so he says, we'll have a competition of silence, right? The first person to talk loses, figuring that he's got the advantage because his wife can't keep quiet, according to him, okay? So they have this competition of silence, and they sit on either side of this table with the manju in the middle. In the meantime, the customers start coming to the store to buy some fabric. So first of all, one person walks in and says, hello, and neither the husband or the wife want to say anything, right? So the customer thinks that there's nobody there, and they leave. And then this happens several times. One customer comes in and says hello and doesn't hear a response and goes to the back and sees the couple sitting there, and they're both sort of giving this look of exasperation, but they won't talk. And the customer thinks, oh, there's something odd going on here, and they leave. But amongst all this, there's another person that's watching this who happens to be a robber. So he comes in and he realizes what's going on, and he starts taking fabric off the shelf and saying, oh, I think I'll take some of this, I think I'll take some of that. And of course, the husband and wife are both still so determined not to talk that they're just looking at him but not saying anything. And finally, the robber comes up to them and he looks at the wife and she says, oh, she's actually not that bad looking. Maybe I'll take her too. And he slings her over his shoulder, at which point she yells out, you good-for-nothing husband, can't you see I'm being taken? And he says, I win, right? So this is the odd story that I told the kids. And I told them that basically what this story is pointing out is that sometimes we get so caught up in details that we forget to see the bigger picture. And I mentioned this in context with Russia and Ukraine, is that, you know, it seems like Russia is so focused on one thing, they're not seeing the bigger picture of the interconnectedness of life, the interconnectedness of countries, the interconnectedness of people. But what was interesting was I asked the children, I asked them, you know, how do you think they could resolve things in Russia and Ukraine? And one boy, he actually came out and said, well, first of all, he said, the people in Russia aren't being told the truth. The Russian government is controlling what the media is being told to the people. So he came up with a very interesting point, because in Buddhism, of course, finding the truth first is the most important. What is true and what is real? So this was a very important thing that he pointed out. Then another boy, I think he's around 8 years old, he perked up and he said, I think they should resolve it, but rock, paper, scissors. Have you ever played that game, rock, jankenpon in Japanese? And we all had a good laugh, but I thought, how wonderful. This 8-year-old boy had a conflict resolution. You know, if all the world, if we can resolve our differences with rock, paper, scissors, it really would be a much more peaceful world. But these moments are Dharma treasures because through the eyes of the children, they have a purity that many of us have forgotten as we grow older. And so when we listen to the Dharma, it's encountering the purity of life. It's encountering the compassion that we can receive from life. And so as we listen together to the teachings, remember, as Shinran says, it's not for the afterlife, but it's for the very moment, here and now, encountering the truth, encountering the oneness, encountering the compassion that we express through Amida Buddha. And so at this time, I'd like to ask you again, please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo. Thank you very much. This will conclude our morning service for today. Next week, I'm actually taking a week of holiday, so we are not actually going to have a service next week. So don't come on the Zoom because there won't be anybody here, and I'm not going to do it from my holiday. So have a week break, and then we'll see you 2 weeks from now. Okay? And 2 weeks from now, we're going to be observing what we call our Ohigan, Spring Higan service. Higan is the equinox service. So we'll be doing that 2 weeks from now, which is the 27th, I believe it is. Okay? So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Reverend Grant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Sensei. Have a good
Thank you.
vacation.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a lovely weekend.
Thank
Take care.
Sorry,
Bye.
Hiroko, you joined too late.
Bye, all.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good rest, Sensei.
Bye. Sorry, Hiroko,
you.
you joined too late. We
Have
just
a nice
finished.
holiday.
You have to look at the recording, I guess.